What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another Dynasty video. What we're going to be diving into is the rookie running back class, kind of doing a review of all of them, looking at how they finished, their PFF advanced stats, and then talking about whether we buy, sell, or hold them in the offseason, looking at real Dynasty trades that are going on right now, rankings going right now, and a little analysis, talking about like what we expect next year and can we buy these rookie running backs, right? We always talk about, can you buy, sell running backs? What should that be, the appropriate strategy be? So let's dive into it. So let's talk about it. Hit that like and subscribe button, and we will dive into the rookie running backs after the intro. All right, let's get into it. Got to put my boy Jahmyr Gibbs up here because that's the rub, right? Everybody knows I'm a big Gibbs guy. So let's go through last year's ADP, right? So this was the ADP in Dynasty in June, July-ish, kind of going in there. We had Bijan going at 1, Jahmyr, Devon Chan. Then we had Zach Charbonnet, Kendre Miller, Roschon, Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, and Israel Abanikanda. Off the top, let's talk about Tank. Tank is probably the biggest disappointment this year in fantasy in terms of the rookie running backs, right? Some people believe that he could take a little bit of role from ETN. I probably had a little bit of that belief. I thought maybe red zone work, he could do that. Didn't do that. Jaguars offense has been a mess. ETN hasn't even been good. So Tank is definitely one of those guys that probably going into the second round of your rookie drafts that just did not pan out. And that's just something to know. I want to kind of talk about him because I'm not going to talk about him after this, but definitely a miss for a lot of people. And what do we expect next year? We'll get into that at the end of the video. Now, what I want to talk about, though, is how they finished so far. Now, they have 1 week left, but this gives us a pretty good idea of where these guys are at. And this is fantasy points per game ranking, right? We're not doing the total points. This is what you put in your lineup every week, what you can expect. Number 1 is Jahmyr Gibbs at 17.7 fantasy points per game, running back 5. Devon Chan, because of his lackluster performance this last week, put him down at running back 2. He was running back 1 before, but when he's in the lineup, he's averaging over 17.3 fantasy points per game. Then you have Bijan, who's been a disappointment. Running back 17, 14.3 fantasy points per game. Essentially been a better middle tier running back 2 who you struggle with having him in your lineup all the time. But those 3 guys are generally the top, right? And that's what we're going to get into. I will say this. I do work for Football Guys. It's a fantasy football company, and I write spotlights every year. And I did a spotlight on Gibbs, and I said Gibbs is probably the better value than Bijan this year because of his pass catching and because of where his ADP was at in terms of startups, right? And I think that's right. Now, I don't know if that's going to be right forever, but I did get that one right. So every once in a while, I kind of know some shit. All right. Then after Bijan, Tyjae Spears, Roschon, Zach Charbonnet, Jaleel McLaughlin are all kind of in that next tier, 8 to 6 fantasy points per game, but nothing like amazing, nothing you're excited about. Chase Brown, Tyler Goodson, and Kendre Miller round out the 8, 9, 10 range. And again, like, you know, this running back class has kind of been lackluster this year. You know, Devon has been injured. Jahmyr was injured for a few games. Bijan hasn't been really Bijan that we had thought. Tyjae hasn't really stepped up. Other guys have not come out. So what are we doing with these guys? All right, let's dive into some spotlights. First, Jahmyr Gibbs. So when we're talking about Jahmyr, I think the biggest thing is his targets. 67 targets, 316 yards. His PFF run rate grade is one of the best in NFL, 81.1. 504 yards after contact is not something that I think many expected based on his size. But if you watched him in college, you probably didn't. You know, you're like, oh, yeah, that's Jahmyr Gibbs. 34 missed tackles forced. PFF receiving grade 65.1. Breakaway percentages on the bottom and how many yards they do on a breakaway. And then 40%, generally speaking, for breakaway percentages is pretty good. I think when you're looking at Gibbs overall, I like to buy him if you can at price, like what he's going at. I'm going to show you some deals here in a little bit. I think he solidified himself as the running back 1 of this roster. I know they love the 1-2 punch with Monty, but I think Gibbs is the more talented back. I always lean towards more talented backs. That's why I was more on Walker than Charbonnet this year coming in. Gibbs to me is the more talented guy. I think he solidified himself as a wide receiver 3 on this roster. And to me, that makes all that you need to know in PPR. Gibbs is your dude. Now, as far as ranks going right now, Football Guys, he's running back 5, Keep Trey Cut, running back 3, TDR running back 2. Here are some deals he's going for. Gibbs Pittman for Ramondre and Chase. Gibbs for Keaton Mitchell, Javonte, Brandon Ayuk. I would smash Gibbs on that side there. The Chase one is interesting because I'd rather have Chase probably the wide receiver, but Pittman's been pretty good this year. I don't want Ramondre. Like the Ramondre is not the one I want. If I can get something else in there for Ramondre, I'd probably smash that side pretty easily. Gibbs in a 4th for Puka and Joe Mixon. I like Gibbs there. I love Puka. I think what he's been doing is fantastic. Mixon to me is a dead asset. I kind of like the Gibbs side there, but I think that's more preference on how you're building. And Nico Collins, Gibbs for Cook, Cooper Kupp, and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, remember, a lot of these deals are mid non-trade deadline contending teams. So I don't know how many of them are going to be, hey, you're going to see that in the offseason, but you could see something like this. I think this is an interesting deal. I think I like the Nico Collins and Jahmyr Gibbs side. Now, next guy, Devon Chan. Let's talk about him. 5'9", 188, PFF run grade, 93.4. Really good when he's out there. 408 yards per contact, 25 missed tackles force. PFF receiving grades, almost 80, right? Breakaway percentage. Again, really, really good. I don't think you're concerned about the production. And the one thing that I was like shocked about when I kind of went through this, because you get in the dog days of fantasy, you don't really look at it. He wasn't really a threat in the receiving game. 22 catches, 31 targets. We expected more there. Like, that's where I think coming into the season, we thought he was going to be a asset at, and him not doing that, but still being top 6 in fantasy points per game. That's huge. Now, I say all this with a caveat. I think he's a sell. Like, I think that when you're looking at him, I love him as a prospect, but the biggest problem was, can he stay healthy? In these offenses, we don't see them get healthy, right? Shanahan, running backs get injured. McDaniels, running backs get injured. Size, frame, I think that there is something to that. If you can sell him at his top 5 price right now, I think that might be the move, right? Now, what does that look like? So when you're thinking of like ranks, everybody has them in that 5 to 8 range. Devon Chan is first for AJ Brown. I like that. I like AJ Brown. Are you going to be willing to give up a first on top of that? I don't mind the deal if you're a contender and you're going for it. Next one I would probably do in a heartbeat for Jalen Waddle, a second and third, right? I like Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle is a very, very good dynasty asset. If I can get a second and third, I can probably find that other production in there. All aboard the train there. Devon Chan for Derek Carr in a first. Interesting, right? I don't like Derek Carr at all. I like the first. We got to re-roll that. You get a super flex quarterback for the value. I think this is a closer deal than people want to admit at face value. And then Devon Chan for Kenneth Walker. This is an interesting one for me. I'm probably really high on Kenneth Walker as opposed to the other buddy. I think he's a better runner. I think he can stay healthier. I know he was a little banged up this year, but I have more faith in his profile being like that. He's still young in that 22, 23 range. I think I'd rather have Kenneth Walker, and I think I'm an outlier there. Let me know how big of a dumbass I am in the comments. I know like our YouTube commenters love to say that, but am I crazy to think that I'd rather have Walker in that than Devon, right? Next guy, Bijan. Let's get into him. Definitely a disappointment with Arthur Smith this year. PFF run grade is 77.1, 597 yards after contact, 50 missed tackles forced. PFF receiving grade 60.1. Breakaway percentage, 216. Rushing, he's been okay. Hasn't gotten the volume. 74 targets, though. It's really good. He's a very, very good receiver. I don't think he gets enough credit for his receiving ability. So for me, like, Bijan is a buy if Arthur Smith returns. So I think the thing is, if Arthur Smith doesn't get fired, which, gosh, please get fired, right? But if he doesn't, I think that there's going to be a buy window. That's when the buy window is going to happen, because people are going to be, oh my gosh, he's coming back. He's going to look bad. You have to buy on talent there, right? Now, if Arthur Smith moves on, I probably can't buy Bijan at the prices that he's going to go at. But there is a buy window possibility with Arthur Smith coming back. Now, Dynasty ranks right now, pretty much everybody has a 1 or 2, depending on where you look. Now, Bijan for a CMC in a third. I like that re-roll. If I'm not a contender, I'm looking at my roster and I'm like, hey, do I believe CMC is going to do it again next year? I'll take Bijan there. I like it both sides, to be honest with you. Bijan a first and a second for Herbert and Kirk. If you need a super flex quarterback like Justin Herbert, that's the value. That's the price. That's what it's going for, right? Bijan a second for AJ Brown. Kind of like Bijan there, to be honest with you. But that's just probably me being down a little bit down on AJ. And then Bijan for Travis Etienne in a first. Again, this really depends where that first is at. If it's a top 5 pick, if I can get Marvin Harrison Jr., if I can get Malik Neighbors, if I can get someone like that at the wide receiver position, Bowers, if it's tight end premium, I'd probably lean that way. If it's outside the top 5, I'd probably lean Bijan there. All right, next one, Tyjae Spears, 5'10", 200. Spears is one of those guys that just didn't get to see the targets or the share because of Derrick Henry being there. And we thought we'd see a little bit more, but this offense has also just been bad, right? The offense has not looked good. The offensive line is absolutely disastrous. 76.2 PFF run grade, 290 yards after contact. Pretty good. Receiving grade is where it's at. He's 61 targets this year. I think for me, Tyjae is a buy based on if Henry's not going to be there, right? I mean, I think that's a risk, though. I don't think that they're just going to throw Henry away. It just depends. Like, he feels like a lifer, but I do think that the press conference that he had this last week, I think was kind of telling. Like, he knows it's probably the end of the run. If that's the case, well, who's going to get the volume? Spears. Spears is going to get the volume. Like, that's an easy kind of 1-2. Hey, this is where he's going to go into. Right now, based on the running backs, he'd probably be a 12 or 13 running back, 12, 13 if they knew he was the guy. Right. So that's where I think he's a buy, because I don't think market dictates what he could be if we're projecting forward. Tyjae Spears or Rashee Rice for Abanikanda, a first and a second. That's probably a steep price to pay. You really have to hope Rashee and Spears hit their ceiling for that deal with that first included in there. Spears and Pittman for Brandon Ayuk in a third. I like the Spears and Pittman side. I'll be honest. I love Brandon Ayuk, but Pittman's giving you running or wide receiver 2-ish numbers. Spears could do that too. What's that third to you, right? Ayuk has been kind of disastrous at times, because I think that offense predicates if Debo or Kittle, there's so many weapons there. How much can you trust Brandon Ayuk? Tyjae Spears for Kirk Cousins in Superflex. I don't know. Depends. If you're a luxury, Kirk Cousins is your QB3. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't mind just taking a roll at Tyjae Spears, but you're really hoping he has that breakout. And it's Spears for Chandler all day. I would take that. That's definitely a contender going for it this week. Spears is just going to be kind of that guy he doesn't need. Next guy, last guy here when we can do the player profile, Roschon Johnson. He was everybody's favorite buy heading into the season. They love this kid from Texas. 67.3 PFF run grade, 158 yards after contact. Really, his receiving grade is what you're looking for. 37 targets, was efficient, not so much production-wise, a lot of dump-offs. To me, Roschon is a more of a buy if they move on from Justin. If they go out and get Caleb Williams, I think that he can elevate Roschon's play. I think he is a running back too, though. I think that Herbert and Roschon are going to be there. Roschon will probably be the third down guy. So he does have some built-in value there, right? So you're buying even then. But I think it's more of a, Caleb will be able to, probably hit him a little bit better than Justin Fields in terms of passing efficiency. Probably has a better role in this offense as a runner if Justin's not there, because Justin is going to cap everybody's upside as the running back room. Like, that's just what happens with Justin Fields. Not to hate on Justin Fields at all. Like, I'm pretty agnostic in the Justin Fields debates, but this is how I look at Roschon. Running back 33, 29, and 30 out there. If you can get him for 2 seconds, I don't mind the shot if you have some extra seconds and they're late. Roschon at first for Debo. Again, I'd take a first for Debo. So then you get Roschon and you expect that breakout. That's not a bad deal there. I would take Roschon for A.J. Dillon at this point. Absolutely. And in this next one, Roschon, Treylon in a second for Josh Downs. I really like Josh Downs. I think it's appropriate value. Treylon's not someone I really want it. The second of Roschon is probably enough. But if you believe Josh Downs is going to have that breakout, I don't know. It's pretty in the middle for me, because I feel like a second of Downs is pretty appropriate. So you throw on those other guys. I think the value is on that side. All right. Now, outside the top 5, Zach Charbonnet is one that we're going to talk about what we're going to do with him here in the next slide. But Jaleel McLaughlin's there. Chase Brown, I think, is a guy that you probably should go out and target. Tyler Goodson and Kendrick Miller is an interesting one, because they just haven't used him, right? He's been banged up. He's been injured. Kamara maybe moving on. That offense is kind of a mess. That's a tough one as well. So when we get into like all of these guys, let's talk about them. Gibbs to me is a buy. Bijan, we talked about those guys. Let's start at Zach. Charbonnet is a hold for me. I don't think you can get appropriate value back for what you put into him. If you can get a late first or early second for him based on maybe the market, I wouldn't hate that deal. But to me, he's a hold, because if Walker goes down, his price is always going to shoot up, right? So if you have him and if Walker gets injured, that's when you probably move him. Chase Brown has done enough explosiveness to probably take over for Mixon next year, or at least be the running back 2. And I'm okay with that. He was getting first series snaps, all of those things. That's what you're looking for. Keaton Mitchell probably would have been a buy had he not injured himself. To me, he's a hold. If you can get him thrown in on a deal, though, yeah, that's probably the best way to get Keaton Mitchell. Kendrick Miller, probably a buy just based on perceived usage, but I wouldn't buy very high. I'm not spending a ton of capital on that. Tank Bigsby's a hold for now. Just get on the field, Bigsby. Jaleel McLaughlin, probably a sell to me. That offense is not one I want to really buy into. And he's probably going to go out and get some other guys too. Like, it's not an offense that's fun right now. Chris Rodriguez, though, sneaky buy. I think Chris Rodriguez might be the buy of this group. Because, they're going to move on from that coaching staff, but on that rookie deal, he's got, the years left after this. I think Antonio Gibson being gone, new staff's going to come in, but Chris Rodriguez could find himself a role. I think he's the cheapest buy of everybody in this group. Then after that, Izzy's probably a buy. Brees is going to be there, but maybe they just have that running back too. And they say, hey, Izzy's our guy. Maybe that's kind of how I look at him. Eric Gray, Zach Evans, pour one out for Zach Evans. Man, that was a miss by me. I'm a dumbass. Sean Tucker, probably a hold if they don't bring anybody back. DeMarcado hold. Deuce Vaughn, probably a sell if you can get anything. Evan Hull, probably a buy. And then Kenny McIntosh. That's how I look at those guys. If you have questions, why, what would you do? Drop them in the comments. That's better for me to kind of type it out and kind of go over it with you guys. But those are kind of my rookie running backs. That's generally speaking how I look and value these guys. So I hope this helps. I hope it brought kind of like, hey, yeah, I love the idea of buying, holding, and having the trade deals there. If any questions you have, drop them in the comments. That's what I'm here for. And again, I reiterate, I'll be doing these dynasty consultations with guys. We're going to do a few more for free before we just put it on the Patreon. So if you want to do that, you could drop your email. You can find me on social media there at X. At DuBois_22. We got to change the little bird, but it's always going to be Twitter in my eyes. So I appreciate you guys. I will check you guys in the next one.